What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to Calvary's Cave, and today we are going to be taking a look at part 6 of our Berserk journey into the Golden Age. We're going to be starting from Campfire of Dreams, the chapter Campfire of Dreams, and we're going to be finishing off at the chapter called Moment of Glory in today's episode. I know in the last video I mentioned that I got a new mic. I don't think I know the settings all that well because it sounded fine on my computer, and once I finally posted it over to YouTube, the sound was like grating my ears, and so I do sincerely apologize to all of you who had to hear that, but you know, it's kind of too late. The audio files are kind of gone except for what I have left on YouTube. I'm gonna try something a little bit different today, and you guys let me know how it sounds for you now. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss a future upload. And a quick warning for all of you out there, we are covering spoilers in this video. I will be covering a spoiler-free review at the ending of every major arc, so right now we're still in the Golden Age. So once I finish up the Golden Age, I'll have a spoiler-free review for y'all. And real quick, if you haven't seen any of my previous videos on my Berserk journey, feel free to click the link, check out the previous videos, and without further ado, let's get into it. Picking up right where we left off, Casca joins Guts at the tree, and she immediately spends her magic medicine that Judo gave her in the last chapter on Guts. And we get some more like romantic shots between Casca and Guts as she's rubbing this medicine all over his bare muscles. Casca and Guts start having some heart-to-heart discussions with each other. They start speaking philosophically and poetically, and it's a beautiful scene, but the entire scene essentially boils down to one big reveal, and that's Guts is going to be leaving the Band of the Hawks at the end of this campaign. And once Casca finally clocks what's going on, Rickert and Pippin show up to let everybody know that Griffith has showed up a day early. He advanced his schedule forward a day once he found out that Guts and Casca were okay. So they immediately rush to the rest of the group. Everyone sees Griffith. Casca runs in and she tells Griffith, oh, everything's my fault. This never would have happened if it weren't for me. And, you know, Griffith being the awesome person that he is, or, you know, at least right now he's awesome, but you know, he lets her know everything's okay, welcome back, gives her one of those smiles again, and everything's happy, everything's fine. But at the very end of the chapter, Casca looks back and sees Guts walking away in the distance, and she was like, you know, was he serious about leaving the crew? Yes, he was. So we cut to the Tudor Empire's stronghold of Doldrey. It appears that the Tudor Empire has superior forces as well as an impenetrable fortress, and they're winning this battle that we see. On the next page, we're having a war council meeting, and we can see that the king of this land is talking about how they're going to recapture Doldrey. Now, Griffith happens to be in attendance. All of the generals are arguing with each other. They're trying to figure out a way to recapture Doldrey. And in this moment, Griffith takes it upon himself to recommend the Band of the Hawks to take on this mission. Now, of course, everybody's up in a fray. He's not ready for this. He's an inexperienced general. He can't get the job done. His army is too small. You're letting it get to your head. And after some back and forth, the king ultimately decides to let Griffith try his hand at recapturing Doldrey with the Band of the Hawks. I told y'all he was chill. So as Griffith starts rounding up his troops, we can see a couple of the other commanders who are like spectating the battle, and they're actually placing their bets on whether Griffith will succeed. Now, one of them is saying, oh, you're putting too much faith in Griffith, but the guy makes the argument like, you know what, we might be fighting alongside the hero of the century. I just thought that was kind of cool, a small detail that, you know, the people are starting to realize, hey, Griffith might be that guy. So our story continues where we see Casca and Griffith talking to each other directly before the battle. Now, y'all remember that one politician that I told y'all about in the previous episode that was like with Griffith that one night? Well, what's very important about this next battle coming up is that he kind of got promoted to the governor of this kingdom. What was his official title? Looks like I didn't write it down in my notes, but it was something ridiculous. One second. He is now the Governor General Genin, Supreme Commander of the Tudor Empire's Northern Battlefront. There you go. Meaning that Griffith might have some personal reasons attached to this job. Inside of the Tudor Empire, we can see that Adon has survived his fight inside of the forest with Guts. And this is where we also get introduced to General Boscon. He is the leader of the Holy Purple Rhino Knights, and these are apparently the current defenders of Doldrey. Boscon berates Adon in this moment, saying like, oh, you're such a failure. You went in with 100 men against one person. How could you lose? You're not fit to be a general. But in this moment, some random dude comes in and says, hey, The governor of this land is summoning you, General Boscon. He heads upstairs, and we can see that the governor has a very special request for this upcoming battle. He wants the general to bring Griffith in alive. But it is time for the battle to reclaim Minas Tirith. No, I meant Doldrey. Boscon is in the distance, and he's like judging Griffith and his battle strategy. It's like, this is the mighty Griffith. But could this be Griffith's lack of experience, or does he have a plan? And Boscon thinks to himself, like, you know, that one request that the governor had, it's probably going to be a hindrance on this mission, so I don't think I'm going to listen to him this time. So we cut back to the governor's chambers, and he immediately reveals why he wants Griffith to be alive, and that's because he fell in love with Griffith. And he's going to do anything in his power to get him back again. Now, Mira sure does know how to write a villain that you hate, like, genuinely, and he just draws them in the most disgusting way possible. Like, look at this guy. I should also mention that this is Guts' final mission before he quits the Band of the Hawks, so he's decided to lock in for this last mission. Now, I'll admit, the Rhino Knights are no pushovers, but, you know, in the presence of Guts, they still get washed. Boscon notices that Guts is heading straight for him, so he proactively, like, unsheathes his sword, parries Guts, and to Guts' surprise, this general can box. Boscon ultimately gives Guts his stars and is like, you know what, maybe you did kill 100 men that one day. So the governor, he's watching everything from his chambers, and he notices that Boscon is getting a little aggressive on the battlefield, and he starts thinking to himself, is he planning on betraying me? Is he not going to leave Griffith alive? Once he figures out what's going on, he immediately takes it upon himself to gear up and head out for battle. However, to do this, it would threaten the security of the entire castle, but it's no matter. No price is too high. I should also point out that this is probably the checkmate moment for the Band of the Hawks. So back to the battlefield, Griffith switches it up and tells everyone, hey, you know what? It's time to retreat. And Boscon, he's still confused. Is this guy really that guy? But there's no time for questions because the governor has just showed up on the battlefield and he's asking the general, what are you doing? Why are you not listening to my commands? So the governor starts shouting out to the rest of the army. He was like, nope, y'all are to bring Griffith in alive, and from here on out, I'm pulling rank, and I am now in charge of the operation. This guy really does want to make sure that he captures Griffith. So the Rhino Knights immediately start their pursuit towards the Band of the Hawks, and they have their back against the river, so they can't go back any farther. Here comes the hard part of this grand scheme. You have to survive this next encounter. Hold your ground. Don't die. We have a plan. It turns out the actual plan was to run away and to have the Rhino Knights follow them so they kick up a whole bunch of dust on the battlefield so it would blind all of the scouts at the actual fortress, which would give Casca enough time to run in and retake the castle. But right as they're entering, Adon is in the background and he can see that Casca is infiltrated. So the misogynist incarnate Adon shows up again. He makes his move and puts a stop to Casca's team, and they surround the remaining Band of the Hawks. Back on the battlefield, we can see that the governor is growing impatient. Oh, he can taste it. Oh, Griffith is just right there. But the real reason that the Rhino Knights are having a hard time advancing is because Guts is at the front line and he is holding his ground. But Boscon has sat back enough and he was like, you know what? It's time to try my hand at beating Guts. After some sick exchanges, we can see that General Boscon is actually on par with Guts. The soldiers on the side even mentioned that they can't see their weapons. How strong is Guts? Do you know how giant that big behemoth sword is? And to make it disappear? And General Boscon has got this war axe or whatever you want to call it. And I'm like, how strong are these guys to move that quick to make a giant hunk of metal disappear to the naked eye? You're telling me that Guts held something like 10 times heavier than this fast enough that it could disappear? I beg your finest pardon? Anyways, checking in on Casca. Yeah, she's fine. Back to Guts and Griffith. Guts is actually having a hard time with Boscon, but he does say that it's not as bad as Nosferatu Zod, and he can handle it. Checking back with Casca. Yeah, no, she's fine. Oh, what's that? Adon pulled another one of his shameless jutsus and like shot a poison arrow at Casca. Well, it's not actually poison. They say it's full of narcotics. I don't even know what his plan was. You could have just used the poison arrow. So we cut to the battlefield, and it is with great sorrow that I inform you that our big boy behemoth sword got off screens while we were focusing on Casca. A moment of silence. It appears that Guts has met his match. Boscon was actually no one to scoff at. Casca is still struggling with Adon at the moment, but she locks in, gets over the narcotics, and puts an end to Adon and his blue whales. We can now recapture the fortress with ease. We can see that Boscon has taken it upon himself to take out some of the members of the Band of the Hawks while Guts is down. And I'm not really sure why, but it looks like they drew Boscon with like the Riddigon in this moment. I'm joking, but that's what it reminds me of. As Guts begins to feel hopeless, he's holding a dagger to protect his men. We can see an arm out in the distance with a giant sword, and it throws this sword onto the battlefield. This giant sword cleaver thing drops right in front of Guts, and it kind of reminds me of God of War 2 when the Blade of Olympus came down so you could defeat the Colossus. But Guts picks it up and turns the tide on the battle by taking the head of General Boscon. Ooh, that's what I'm talking about! Who do you think you are? I am! The governor mocks Boscon in his defeat and tries to rally the remaining troops to finish his order to capture Griffith. But it looks like the Rhino Knights have all lost their fighting spirit and their boss just died. And he was the strongest of them all, so if he lost, all of them have no chance of making out of it alive. And one of the soldiers out of nowhere, he notices and points out that, hey, look back there. Everyone turns around and we can see Casca and the Band of the Hawks are dancing triumphantly on the walls of Doldrey with their flag flown all over the fortress. Casca has succeeded in her mission. The governor is speechless once he realizes that he's been defeated, and Griffith makes the order to hunt down the remaining opposition. The governor attempts to rally the troops, but it's no use. He gets knocked off of his horse and he is left kneeling at the feet of Griffith. And we just get this awesome shot of Griffith looking down at him, and the governor is groveling at his feet. Gennin tries to plead with Griffith, tells him, hey, we can overlook everything, but didn't you feel the spark between us? Don't you know everything that I've sacrificed just to make sure that you survived today? But Griffith coldly explains that he has no feelings for this guy. He was simply a stone on the path that he walks. Kind of like Nolan calling Debbie a pet and invincible. Gennin screams at Griffith, but Griffith pulls out his sword and majestically sticks it into his eye, and that is the end of the Governor Gennin. Rest in peace, my guy. She got him by a bazooka. Flash forward to Guts meeting up with Casca after the fight. She's still recovering from the narcotics in her system, and Guts sets down his sword. He picks up Casca, and it's time to go meet your leader. It's time to celebrate with Griffith. I also like to mention that Casca and Guts are getting a lot closer with each other now. They're starting to talk a lot more. He's picking her up. I'm just saying, it looks like character development to me. But right before Guts leaves, he turns around and looks at the mysterious sword that landed in front of him in the middle of the battle. And he's like, you know what? No, it can't be. And the person that he has in mind was Nosferatu Zod. And it turns out that he was right. Zod was on the battlefield and he did throw it. And Zod breaks the fourth wall, looks directly at the camera and says that the eclipse is coming and the demon advent is upon us. Back at the castle, we can see that Minister Foss is conspiring with a bunch of hooded, cloaked figures, and they want to know how to take out Griffith. And they want to do it before he gets promoted from this latest victory that he had. And they're thinking poison as usual because Foss lacks originality. But the queen mysteriously emerges from the shadows and she puts her stamp of approval on Griffith's assassination. The queen starts monologuing, and while she's monologuing, we cut over to Foss's thoughts, and while he's thinking to himself, we get the craziest reveal that the queen was actually cheating on the king with Lord Julius. And Foss may have planted the idea that it was Griffith's fault that Julius died. Now, Foss doesn't know that for sure, but he was kind of right. And we cut over to the queen's thoughts, and she's like justifying why she was cheating on her husband with Julius, of all people, Lord Farquaad. But she has it in her head that it's Griffith's fault, so she's big mad right now. But ultimately it doesn't matter because she's already decided that she's going to kill Griffith over it. Back to Minister Foss, we can see that everything is going according to plan. That is until Castle Guard number 3 enters stage left and hands Minister Foss a letter. Foss opens up the letter, he starts reading it, and his eyes get super wide. After reading the letter, Floss is freaking out, and he was like, you know what, I think I need some fresh air out here. So he immediately excuses himself from the room. Griffith and the squad pull up to the function, fully dripped out. We see my goat Pippin. He's dressed for the occasion as well. The Band of the Hawk is receiving a ton of praise, but it's clear that Griffith is stealing the spotlight. Guts is kind of blending in with the crowd when he turns over to his right, and he can see that Casca is wearing a dress. She notices that he notices, so she runs up to Guts, grabs him by the shoulder, and drags him outside. They start poking fun at each other, and you know, I kind of really like this scene between Guts and Casca, but she ultimately asks the question, do I look good in this dress? And to my surprise, Guts actually said yes! Do you feel the character development? She mentions that it's actually weird for Guts to be at a party like this, and Guts explains like, hey, I really do intend on quitting, and after everything that Griffith has built up until now, I at least want to see it for myself firsthand. Casca is clearly upset by this, but they get interrupted by the king, who walks up to the stage to announce the momentous occasion that they have recaptured Doldrey, and that the guests of honor are Griffith and the Band of the Hawks. And it's also announced during this celebration that the Band of the Hawks will gain the White title, and they will now be known as the White Phoenix Knights, led by the White Phoenix General, Griffith. Griffith and Guts lock eyes in this moment, and they both share a laugh and enjoy this moment. And that brings us to the end of this video. If this is your first time reading this series, how did you feel about these chapters? And for those of y'all who have read this before, please don't be angry at me. I have stopped reading the manga up until this point, so from here on out, it is a completely blind reaction for you guys. But thank you guys so much for joining me. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss a future upload. You guys stay beautiful, and I will see you in the next video. You still here?